Thank you very much for inviting me to speak at the Canadian Policy Centre Conference 2020 virtual meeting. My presentation will focus on the development of national standards for human research and its oversight, and in particular, what national standards are, why we need national standards for human research, how national standards are developed, and how national standards are changing the Canadian human research landscape. I'd like to begin by outlining who develops national standards in Canada. The Standards Council of Canada, SCC, is a Crown corporation that accredits standards development organizations, or SDOs, to develop standards that meet the needs of industry, government, and consumers. SCC accredited SDOs are responsible for the development, publication, and maintenance of Canadian national standards. Currently, 12 SDOs have been accredited since SCC began its operations 50 years ago. You may recognize some of them, like CSA, Canadian Standards Association, a logo stamped on virtually every light bulb, and HRSO, the SDO that develops national standards for healthcare. Among these SDOs is the SDO that I represent, HRSO, Human Research Standards Organization. All SDOs are not-for-profit organizations, and many, like HRSO, do not charge users for the national standards that they develop. HRSO is a Canadian not-for-profit standards development organization. It develops national standards of relevance to Canadians conducting, overseeing, and participating in human research. Its sister company is a conformity assessment organization called Human Research Accreditation Canada, or HRA Canada. The national standards developed by HRSO are used as a basis for HRA Canada's accreditation program. So why do we need national standards for human research? Generally speaking, national standards frame, guide, and normalize almost every aspect of our lives. In Canada, we have national standards pertaining to healthcare, IT, accounting, agriculture, plumbing, electricity, and many others. These promote best industry practices, emphasizing safety and quality, and ensure the interoperability of such practices. National standards eliminate the variability in interpreting regulations, guidelines, and policies, and for human research, provide stakeholders with clear, concise requirements upon which they can build their procedures. National standards promote uniform conduct of human research, creating a research environment that is harmonized and collaborative. What is the difference between a policy, a standard, and a procedure? These terms are often used interchangeably, and this has led to numerous misunderstandings of what governs human research in Canada. First of all, a policy tells us what is important and answers the question, why do I need this? It doesn't tell us what is required or even how to do it. A standard assigns quantifiable measures to something and answers the question, what is required in order to do this? A procedure establishes the proper steps to take and answers the question, how do I do this? You may be familiar with procedures and their importance in maintaining operations, but without standards, when it comes to human research, we have been basing our procedures on our individual interpretations of policies and other regulatory and guidance documents, making it almost impossible to harmonize our practices and promote collaborations. An example of the interplay between policies, standards, and procedures is something we're all experiencing today: physical distancing. Consider the current policy. Physical distancing must be practiced in order to reduce the transmission of disease. So how would you write a procedure for this policy? Without a standard, We may all interpret this policy differently, and our procedures would vary greatly. However, if we consider the standard individuals shall remain 2 meters apart, this standard assigns a quantifiable measure to the policy and tells us what is required in order to meet the policy. From here, one can easily write a procedure. Another example of a policy comes from the Canadian policy governing human research, the Tri-Council Policy Statement, Ethical Conduct for Research Involving Humans. The TCPS2 states, consent shall be given voluntarily. I imagine that human researchers have procedures for obtaining voluntary informed consent from research participants, but that no two procedures are the same because the level of adherence to this policy is left up to individual interpretation. Currently, HRSO has a technical committee that is developing a standard and assigning requirements for this policy so that Canadian researchers can understand what is required to meet the policy when they write their procedures. How does an SCC accredited SDO like HRSO develop a national standard? Well, the first step in the process is the development of a proposal. A proposal is a document that describes the project need for the national standard, and this project need usually comes from stakeholders. In the case of HRSO, the project need can come from REB members, Research Ethics Board members, researchers, research administrators, Health Canada, or other SDOs, and even research participants, among others. The proposal is transformed into a notice of intent, which is then submitted to the Standards Council of Canada for publication. The draft national standard is developed from the proposal and the notice of intent according to SCC accredited procedures, including the specific way in which requirements are written and expressed. National standards are developed from current policies, regulations, and guidelines, or what are referred to as normative documents. Recall that these documents tell us why I need to do this, and the national standard tells us what is required in order to do this. That is why a national standard is expressed through requirements that are easy to understand, unambiguous, complete, and accurate. A specific technical committee is established to develop the draft national standard. Because the published national standard must meet the interest of all stakeholders, it is very important that technical committee members represent a balance of concerned interest groups and come from all regions of Canada. Another way SDOs ensure that national standards meet the interests of all stakeholders is to release their draft national standards to the public for consultation for a set period of time. At HRSO, our public consultation period is 60 days. All comments and suggestions received from the public are addressed by the technical committee, and the draft national standard is revised if necessary to produce the final national standard. The Standards Council of Canada undergoes a review of the final national standard prior to publishing it to ensure that it fulfills SCC's accreditation requirements. Published national standards are accessible to the public for use free of charge, as in the case of HRSO, and are maintained at regular intervals and revised when there are changes to or new normative documents. All decisions made during the national standards development use the process of consensus decision-making. In general, consensus decision-making is a process for groups to generate widespread agreement in a way that respects the contributions of all participants. Why do we use consensus decision-making? We do it to ensure that all opinions, ideas, and concerns are taken into account and to find solutions that address all members' views, including those of minority groups. Consensus decision-making processes all share the same elements. The process is inclusive. As many stakeholders as possible are involved in group discussions. It's participatory. All participants are allowed a chance to contribute to the discussion. It's collaborative. The group constructs proposals with input from all interested group members. It's agreement seeking. The goal is to generate as much agreement as possible. And most importantly, the process is cooperative. Consensus participants are encouraged to keep the good of the whole group in mind when making decisions. HRSO has published 5 notices of intent, and our first national standard was submitted to the SCC for publication earlier today. We began the development of our second national standard, Ethical Review and Oversight of Human Research, in September, and expect to release the draft national standard for public consultation at the end of this year. What benefits can researchers, REBs, and institutions derive from national standards? For researchers, national standards reduce the variability of interpretation when writing or following procedures. They break down barriers to interoperability, leading to harmonization, collaboration, and partnership. They promote regional or specialty research ethics boards. They prevent delays in multi-center trial management. They provide assurance that all ethical and regulatory requirements are being met or exceeded. And they promote successful inspections by regulators and research sponsors, which leads to less downtime, of course. For regulators and funding agencies, national standards broaden the inspection capabilities of Health Canada. They provide funding agencies further assurance that commitments are being met by researchers and institutions. And they help the government oversee a regulatory environment that promotes competitiveness of Canadian businesses and ensures the safety of Canadians. For the public, national standards provide assurance that human research is being conducted safely and ethically. National standards provide assurance that safeguards are in place to protect the well-being of the public when they choose to participate in research. And they promote trust in human researchers and confidence in the data that they produce. And finally, a few words about accreditation. The assessment of conformity to national standards in our industry is called accreditation. If we take Health Standards Organization, HSO, which is another SDO, it develops national standards for healthcare. Its sister company, Accreditation Canada, is the organization that conducts conformity assessments based on HSO's national standards. Similarly, HRSO develops national standards for human research. Its sister company, HRE Canada, is the organization that conducts conformity assessments. Accreditation based on national standards, like the program offered by HRE Canada, provides assurance that national standards are employed in an institution's procedures. It is a demonstration of transparency and accountability for institutions regarding the conduct and oversight of their human research. And it is a worldwide public affirmation of quality. And most important of all, accreditation promotes interoperability between institutions and promotes pan-Canadian harmonization and collaboration. I wish to thank you very much for your time and interest. If you have any questions for me, please reach out to me through the email presented here or leave a comment on our website. Thank you.